another question that we got was just what is the long-term vision beyond even more course development for Math Academy? Um, what's the next leap for Math Academy? What would make it twice as effective? Not just twice as like efficient in terms of performance optimization, but also in terms of like getting people to stick around longer, getting more people to skill up on math. Like, what are the big needle movers? You think? Like, I mean, for example, one of them that we've talked about before was like just filling out the rest of an undergrad math degree. Like, that's if this is going to be the ultimate math learning platform, like let's have an undergrad math degree on it, where you can learn every like anything you want to learn in college, you can do in our system.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
would, I mean, obviously, there's a number of things we could do. Um, One would be more of projects integrated. So not to get, this is a whole nother discussion, but the whole project based learning, can be taken to way too far. Projects are built on a foundation of skills. You can't do project without skills and have it be efficient at all. I mean, you can, it's just going to be incredibly inefficient because the students don't really know what they're doing. So you're trying to get them put together a bunch of component skills into this bigger thing. Um, so, one thing that we realized while doing the machine learning course that we needed serious high quality projects, and I think doing more of those at every mathematical level would be. I'll just run through without getting too deep on any of these. Automaticity training, right? So starting with math facts, multiplication, addition, and multiplication tables, things like that. As you get higher up, it'd be like calculating percents or square roots or things in your head really quickly. There's lots of sort of just mental tricks. And I don't mean like anything complicated, but things where people can say, well, what's 25% of, I don't know, 800 or something. Or, I mean, that's easy, but I mean, something really where people have to work it out. And you're like, dude, just do this, right? So when you're really good at that, then you can think through mathematical problems faster because you can just kind of do a lot of stuff in your head without even really putting any effort into it, as opposed to like having to stop and do stuff. But we know that, we've heard from a lot of families, tutors, people, that kids are and teachers, that kids are not have not mastered their math facts. They don't know the multiplication tables. They're finger counting, not finger counting in fourth or fifth grade. They're finger counting in 10th grade. And if you can't do, even multiplication, if you don't know multiplication tables, you're going to really struggle even without basic algebra. So we got to do automaticity training. We've talked a little bit about having historical or context or applications. Like what is this? Well, what would this be used for? Or how would this be cool? That could be more integrated with projects as well.
Yeah, kind of goes back to the like if you imagine like the top tier best quality tutor sitting next to you, like in addition to teaching you all the material, they're probably going to be like just adding tidbits that they know you're interested in.
Hey, they
Yeah,
do this. So this is how, oh, cool. And they kind of like
yeah,
really bring it alive. And sometimes just those historical notes, the applications, like, oh, here's how this is how they traffic control. This is traffic control systems, how they calculate this. And you're like, really? Yeah, well, that's how we know. If you can bring some of that to life for students, I think that helps them understand it. Because a lot of like more basic math, they're like, why do I need to know trigonometry or something? Or why do I, I mean, and a lot of high school teachers would struggle with that. And most people would struggle with that unless they had really done some research on it. And it's just not a status. Well, you're gonna need this, in pre-calculus. You need this in calculus. You need this in college. Kids are like, okay, you know, it's not super motivating. It's not as motivating. I mean, some kids are like, they're just fine. They like enjoy learning it and getting an A or getting into a really good school or whatever. That's motivation for them enough. They're like, it's other kids. They need more. They need a little more. They're not buying what you're selling, and so you need to work a little harder. You know, what I'm always sort of trying to do in terms of like the North Star is periodically closing my eyes and go, okay, what would the ultimate online learning system do? If you just forget about math, kind of forget about anything, close your eyes. Short of the Matrix, where they jack something in the back of your head and you learn kung fu or a foreign language, in 15 minutes, just because they inject it in your brain somehow, some magical way. Okay, short of that, what would it look like? What would you do? And so if you do that every once in a while, you can start thinking like, oh, it would be really awesome. And this is how some of this stuff happens. Um, but another one would be would be challenge problems. Really difficult. I mean, this is people see in textbooks the star problem, the double star. We
Mhm.
can add some of those things. For especially to the honors courses.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one thing that we've been realizing recently is that a lot of these SAT problems, ACT problems, competition math problems make for really, really good challenge problems. And
Mm-hmm.
they cover the whole curriculum. They're not just concentrated in one area. So yeah, we could potentially get some double whammies, like and knock two birds out with one stone. Not only are you doing some challenge problems, is deepening your understanding of the material, and if you're a particular kind of student, it might actually be fun too. But you're also you, you may not realize it at the time, but you're actually also prepping for like the SAT or the ACT. You're you can come out of the course actually scoring decently on the AMC exam. Like that'd be cool.
Yeah, because if you could imagine, for instance, if you set your kid to something like Bronx Science or one of these like elite magnet math and science schools, and you took a pre-calculus course, like what do you think that pre-calculus course would look like or should look like? It's like, well, there's probably some pretty tough teacher who's really good, and they're not only teaching the standard pre-calculus curriculum, it's probably a layer of more advanced material layered on top. Probably some really interesting projects that we do every once in a while. He or she probably knows all kind of stories like, when I used to work at NASA, or when we used to do this and we did research. You'd be like, oh wow, talking about these cool stories, and Matthew'd be like, that would make it really cool. And
Mhm.
by the way, this teacher is sort of runs the math team, so he's always kind of recruiting, or she's always recruiting for the math team, and they're like, okay, well, so he's like trying to build everybody up. He's kind of killing two birds with one stone. So the more I get done on a pre-calculus course, the less I have to like train after school. So he's like getting a lot of the stuff done in class, doing a lot more challenging problems, trying to incentivize and challenge the kids to do harder things, to see, hey, this is fun, right? Like seeing what you can do and stuff. So, I think that's, looking at a model of like a truly excellent, like you said, what are like the top 5 or 10 pre-calculus courses in the country? How are they taught? What is the experience like? Or the best 10 that ever been taught? There was a guy in 1975 who worked at such and such high school and whatever, and they would be a finalist or in the national math team 3 or 4. What was that guy doing? I guarantee you, he was doing a lot more than your normal math class, right?
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
so, you know, do try and imagine what that person was doing. If there's stories about them, try and read about them. It's like, what were you doing? What were they doing? They they were probably working. The kids were probably working really hard. It was probably known to be a really challenging class, but had high expectations, but challenged them, kept them motivated. All these sorts of things. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to sort of use as inspiration or as models for what we're ultimately doing. And it's easy for us to get caught in the day to day, like, well, we got to get this fixed or that fixed. Like, where are we going? Like, what does this need to be? And another one would be integrating coding into it. So that would be super cool. I mean, one thing that you and I would always talk about would be, we're building what we wish we had when we were in middle school or high
Exactly.
school or college. You know, and it's like, man,
Yeah.
can you imagine if you were coding, like you had Python coding in your pre-calculus course, and instead of just doing written class, like you would do the normal problems, you've written stuff, but then it would culminate in some coding. You'd have to like, I don't know, have a bunch of
Yeah.
cool projects that leveraged all that, and you had to write the Python to make it work. I mean, that would be awesome. That would have been super fun. And a lot of guys or girls, even who say like code too, is who would have been just they're pretty good at math or good at math, but they're just like I don't know, but they love coding, and now they get to do it. They would have brought it to life for them. They would just you brought in a whole nother crowd. They're like, oh, this is cool. Now I can do some cool stuff
Yeah.
with this math.
That's something that I think a lot of people realize later, and like who go into software engineering, like they don't really care about math in school, but they love coding, and at some point, I mean, they don't start coding young necessarily. They find coding eventually later, like late in high school or in college or whatever, and then eventually they build up the foundations of coding, and then they realize that if they just knew all their math, then they could be doing so much more. And it's like the earlier you make this happen, somebody like gets interested in coding, sees how important math is to doing non-trivial coding. Then the earlier the earlier in life they get the motivation to skill up on both fronts. And if you graduate, like just imagine like a kid graduating high school knows like they went through they not only do they know pre-calculus with like coding applications but also calculus with coding applications, and the instruction was so efficient that they also learned linear algebra and multivariable calc and some differential equation. Like they learned like basically your core engineering math and
Yeah.
all with coding applications, and they come into college and they are just like they're just blowing the socks off of anybody who gives them an opportunity to do some research, to do whatever, an internship, like everything. They already get the basics of everything. They're ready to actually make some kind of serious impact, which is like it's so rare to see in like an undergraduate researcher or an intern, right? Like it's always like you can't count on them making like a serious impact. You just like throw them a toy problem or whatever. But like if you can actually make a serious impact at a young age because you have the skills to do so, then you can just compound that into just such a massive compression of time and figuring out what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, sometimes this happens in technology too, is you get a lot of people, coders, who they get interested in certain categories of work that are highly mathematical, and they realize they don't have the math for it. And then they have to go back and clean that up and learn all that later, which we have a lot of customers who fit that. And I guess if they had their preference, like, man, I wish I had done this in high school or college, and then I just knew all this stuff, and I could just do all this stuff, and instead I have to kind of do it now. Yeah, get it done. And but yeah, I think for me, coding too, like for math, like when I write something in code, in a way I encode it in my brain in a more comprehensive way, and that could be just me or maybe certain types of people. That it just sticks with me. Once I write code to do something, I feel like I kind of intellectually own it, cognitively own it. Like I know it, really know it, because I can see the code. I can see the structure of the code. And like, okay, yeah. So if you're like, okay, well, this is what a surface integral is, or this is what an eigenvalue is, and you kind of do stuff mathematically. But if you're writing code that does all that yourself, you're like, oh yeah, let's write the code, right? So loop and then I remember that, right? It's just that, for my brain in particular, it's just the more procedural way. And I think other people might be a little different, but it adds in another way of encoding the knowledge. So if you can encode the same knowledge but coming in from completely different directions, it sticks more, right?
Yeah, more connection. You're layering more. I mean, it's basically just layering, right? Like you're just layering more advanced applications and more advanced content, whatever, more advanced anything that requires this knowledge as a component skill is going to get more deeply ingrained You're going to develop a kind of structural integrity. If there's any sort of weaknesses in the component skill, and you keep layering on top of it, they're going to get exposed. And then you're going to see that you struggle with some element of coding it up because you have a weakness in the component skill, and that forces you to really make it more robust. And then,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. Was there anything else that we've talked about that I didn't mention in terms of the types of things that we want to add to the system that we haven't added, that are more about not features, but just more adding elements that would improve the overall learning experience?
Um, well, okay. I think one part that you and I have talked about, but we haven't mentioned yet on the podcast, is that the idea of goal setting.
Oh,
Like, why are you coming? What do you want to get out of using the system?
right.
And also showing progress towards that goal. I mean, there's progress in completing courses and stuff, but there's also progress of like when somebody signs up for the system, what is their North Star? What do they want? Sometimes they don't even know what they want. Like that's
Right.
part of the challenge. Like, help me help you, help me understand like what you want, so
Right.
I can help you get there, and we can show to you that you're getting there in a reasonable time frame. And you can look back also. Goal setting is kind of the forward idea here, but there's also a backward idea, which is like looking at progress. So you come like 25% of the way to your goal or whatever, and you look back at probably like the types of math or where you were, what course you placed into, whatever. There's like various ways of measuring problems that you got wrong in your initial diagnostic. And then you look back 3 months later, and you're like, wow, like I know how to all that stuff. I struggled with that stuff. Really? That was so. This was something back when we were developing the Eurisco sequence, the super advanced math and computer science sequence
Hmm.
that we made within our original Math Academy school program, where the kids were like doing all this machine learning, reproducing the Blondie 24 research program in high school. Like that was a lot of intense work. And one thing that I remember you and I would talk about sometimes is that like the kids, they don't really appreciate like just how far they were coming. Like they would, it's like almost they would show up like day after day, week
Hmm.
after week, and be like, "Oh, Justin's gonna make me like implement
It's really hard.
another
Yeah.
really hard thing," and then like so they go initially linear regression is this really hard thing, just like fitting a line to a data set because they've never done this before, right? Like, what's a loss function? What's what do you mean like have the model ingest the data? There's like lingo and like just the frame of what's the game that we're playing here, fitting a model to a data. And then it increases. They're like, okay, linear regression, like we move on to logistic regression. Like we're just layering more stuff. Eventually they're doing backprop and neural nets, and it's just the feeling every day is like just like, oh man, this is brutal. This is hard. I mean, they know on some level, but like, okay, I'm doing a hard thing, and I'm not sure I'm able to do it at the beginning, but then we actually get through it like reasonably quickly, and now I can do it, and that's really cool. So I like that. But also, like, do things ever stop getting hard? Like, when's it going to become easy? Like, is this really like what they don't see their long? They don't. What they see is the short game, and the short game is on loop being like it's hard, it's hard, it's hard. Okay, it's a little bit easier. They don't always see the compounding of like from it's hard to it became a little bit easier. And then so what I would have to do sometimes is um like by the time they're implementing like decision trees and whatever, like we're a semester in, like and they're I show them like the next assignment, and they're just like, oh, that looks hard. And then
Yeah.
I show them like, do you remember like back when we did like logistic regression, linear regression, like breadth first search in a graph, and you had that same reaction right there. What's your reaction to this now? And they're like, oh no, I could like that's a component of this. I could code that up in like 10 minutes. Like, what's the big deal? I'm like, no. Remember, you were saying just like 3 or 4 months ago, that you were groaning in the same exact way. And I guarantee you, 3 or 4 months from now, this back propagation, this Dijkstra's algorithm, whatever, you're gonna have the same reaction. It's gonna be like it's gonna be muscle memory. You're gonna have new superpowers, and you're not gonna realize that you have them until I
So,
show them to you.
so when I was teaching the Math Academy courses at the in the middle school back early days, and I had the initial group of the initial guinea pig group who were eighth graders, and I had like the seventh graders, and they were doing pre-calculus. Eighth graders were doing BC calculus, and I had this one student, and she Clara, and she was just stellar student. Um, and funny thing was that she was not only like the best math student, she was also captain of the cheerleading team. So it was just like a it's like two of the top kids, and there were two cheerleaders, which was just so funny. And they wear their cheerleading outfit on Fridays because they had practice, you know what I mean? And they're just like lapping people. Anyway, so Clara would always get frustrated when I'd introduce a topic. I'd be like, okay, we're doing completing the square or something or whatever it was, right? And she'd be like, and the thing with Clara is when Clara's unhappy, we're all unhappy because Clara had this really big personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when Clara's like, and I'm like, Clara, what's wrong? And she's like, I'm confused. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm just explaining it. You understand. She's just like, much confused. I'm like, Claire, have I ever taught you something that you didn't ultimately learn and find easy? She's like, no. I'm like, well, then let's just take it down a notch. Just relax. Trust me, I'm going to get you through this. Okay? This is going to be, you are not going to be confused for very long, right? Jesus, fine, whatever. But it was one of these things. It was like every time she just frustrated, and, but it's like I had to remind her, just look at what we've done, right? Look at what you've done. You're going to be fine, right? You're going to do great. And, but I really, I do like what you're saying here about, you want to not only show them what they're going to be able to do, but you need to show them how much progress they've made. So like a couple of times when I've had trainers, I remember I went to this one woman and she was like a performance coach. And what she would do, you'd meet with her like once a month. She'd go in and she'd measure your body. You'd do this whole body composition analysis, like how much body fat and muscle and everything. And I can't even remember how I found her. Somebody must have recommended her to me. But so, and they would take take this body fat analysis, body composition analysis, and then there'd be like this multi-page printout that would show all the numbers and would actually like an image of your body, and it would kind of like the fatter you were, the bigger it was, or it would kind of show almost the muscle and the fat, and then you'd go on every month and you'd see the progress and you'd be like, 25%, 23%, 21% body fat, 18, whatever it was. And, and I'm getting further and further down, and she'd be like, good job. And she'd be like, okay, here's how much protein, here's the calories I want you to hit every day. Here's your protein, here's your carbohydrate, whatever. She had the whole thing. And I'd tell her what my workout was. She's like, okay, that's great, but here's what I want you to do from the diet side. And it worked really well. And I loved looking at the sort of performance report, but also just looking at the history and seeing how far I've come. Now, the one thing that she didn't do, which would be awesome, she said, no, if you keep going for 6 more months, oh my God, that's great. This is where you're going to be, right? Look at this. You're like, holy crap. I really will look like a superhero. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you get from here to here? It's like, okay, 6 more months. We're going to take you down from whatever it was, 17 or 16% body fat down to 10% or 11%. We're going to build muscle, whatever it was. And you'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going to keep going. Right? So look, you can do this. Look at how much progress you've made. You should feel good about it. And this should demonstrate to you that what we're doing here is working. So even some days you want to eat stuff that you shouldn't eat, or you don't want to work out or whatever, just remember it works, and this is the result. This is what you've got to enjoy from that. Now, look the next step, and I think that's definitely what we want to build into the system. We want more of a not just a snapshot, but look how far you've come, but then also where you could go if you just keep it up. And if we have that sort of projected onto the path that they're setting, because like we have certain adults who have very specific goals related to maybe machine learning, or maybe they're at a university or a master's program. But we have parents who have kids and like, well, what, my student, if she finishes calculus in 8th or 9th or 10th grade, then what is she going to do? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, people don't always see the possibilities. They think the end of the road is calculus when really that's just table stakes. That's you just arrived at the big race. Calculus is that was your entry ticket.